The cold wind whistled through the empty streets of Redemption Creek as Daisy Fletcher pressed her back against the rough wooden planks of the church, her trembling arms cradling a bundle wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Her eyes darted frantically up and down the dusty main street, searching for any sign of the men who had been pursuing her since dawn. The baby in her arms stirred, and Daisy held her breath, praying the infant wouldn't cry out and reveal their hiding place. It was 1876, and for a woman alone with a child and no husband in the unforgiving Montana territory, dangers lurked around every corner. Owen Hayes pulled his horse to a stop outside the general store, his brow furrowing as he caught a flash of movement behind the whitewashed church at the end of the street. He'd been riding for 3 days straight to reach Redemption Creek, hoping to find work at one of the nearby ranches. The last thing he expected was to spot a woman clearly in distress, clutching what appeared to be a baby to her chest. His hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip as he scanned the area for whatever threat had driven her to hide. Dismounting with practiced ease, Owen secured his horse to the hitching post and made his way toward the church, careful to keep his footsteps quiet. As he rounded the corner, the woman gasped, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to bolt despite the exhaustion evident in her posture. The baby in her arms made a soft cooing sound, tiny fingers reaching up from the bundle of blankets. "Madam," Owen said softly, removing his hat in a gesture of respect, "I don't mean to frighten you." He kept his distance, recognizing the terror in her eyes. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" Daisy clutched the baby tighter, her knuckles white. "Please," she whispered, "just go away. They'll find me if anyone sees us talking." Owen nodded slowly, understanding without needing details. He'd seen enough of the West to recognize a woman running from something or someone. "I'll stand here until you're ready," he said simply, leaning against the church wall a respectful distance away. "Take your time, I'm not going anywhere." The statement was simple, but something in his steady gaze made Daisy believe him. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. The baby began to fuss, tiny face scrunching up in preparation for a wail. Daisy bounced gently, murmuring soothing words, but the infant's cries grew louder. Panic flashed across her face as she looked up at Owen. "Here," he said, reaching into his saddlebag. "I have some water, and there's a bit of bread left from my provisions." He offered them without moving closer, setting them on the ground between them. Daisy hesitated only a moment before reaching for the water skin. She dampened her finger and touched it to the baby's lips, offering what little comfort she could. "Thank you," she whispered. "Name's Owen Hayes," he said, keeping his voice low. "Just rode in from Wyoming territory." "Daisy," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Daisy Fletcher, and this is Emma." She looked down at the baby, her expression softening despite her fear. Owen nodded, careful not to press for more information than she was willing to give. "Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He glanced toward the main street. "Who are you hiding from, if you don't mind my asking?" Daisy's expression hardened. "My late husband's brothers," she said, the words coming out bitter and clipped. "They believe Emma's inheritance belongs to them now that Thomas is gone." Owen's jaw tightened. He'd seen it before women and children left vulnerable after losing the man of the house, vultures circling before the body was even cold. "How long have you been running?" 3 days, Daisy admitted, exhaustion evident in her voice. "They found us at my sister's place in Helena. I barely had time to grab Emma and a few essentials before they broke down the door." She swallowed hard. "Thomas left us a small gold claim up north. It's not much, but it's all we have." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "Those men, they in town now? I saw them ride in about an hour ago." "They're probably at the saloon, asking questions." Daisy's eyes darted nervously toward the street. "They won't stop looking." "Then we need to get you somewhere safe," Owen said decisively. "Both of you." He studied the sky, noting the position of the sun. "It'll be dark soon. That'll help." Daisy shook her head frantically. "You don't understand. The Fletcher brothers are well known in these parts. They have friends everywhere. There's nowhere to hide." Owen considered this information, his mind working through options. "What about the law? Have you spoken to the sheriff?" A bitter laugh escaped Daisy's lips. "Sheriff Barlow, he's been in Jacob Fletcher's pocket for years. He'd hand us over before I could finish explaining." Owen frowned, not liking the odds but unwilling to walk away from a woman and child in danger. "My father used to say that the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same," he murmured, more to himself than to Daisy. He straightened his shoulders. "I'll help you." Daisy stared at him, bewildered. "Why would you risk yourself for strangers?" Owen's gaze was steady as he replied, "Because no decent man would do otherwise." Before Daisy could respond, the sound of booted feet approaching the church made her freeze. Owen moved swiftly, positioning himself between Daisy and the potential threat. His hand moved to his revolver, ready but not drawing. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "If things go badly, run for the tree line behind the church." A gruff voice called out, "You there, Cowboy? You seen a woman with a baby around here?" Owen stepped forward casually, blocking the view to where Daisy huddled with Emma. He faced three men, each wearing expressions of barely contained violence. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a cruel twist to his mouth, stared at Owen suspiciously. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Owen said, touching the brim of his hat. "Can't say I have, just arrived in town myself. Something wrong?" The leader, Jacob Fletcher, Owen presumed, narrowed his eyes. "My sister-in-law has taken something that doesn't belong to her. Family matter." His hand rested on his gun belt in what was clearly meant to be a warning. Owen nodded sympathetically. "Family troubles are the worst kind. Wish I could help, but like I said, just got to town, planning to see the preacher about work opportunities in the area." He gestured toward the church entrance on the opposite side of the building. Jacob studied Owen's face, searching for deception. "If you see a blonde woman with a baby, you let me know. We're staying at the hotel." He turned to leave, then added with a menacing smile, "There's a reward for information." "I'll keep that in mind," Owen replied evenly, watching as the three men walked away. He waited until they disappeared around the corner before returning to Daisy, who was trembling so violently he feared she might collapse. "They're gone for now," he said softly, "but they'll be back. We need to move quickly." Daisy nodded, clutching Emma close. "Where can we go?" "They'll check every boarding house and hotel," Owen thought for a moment. "I passed an abandoned trapper's cabin about 5 miles outside town. It's not much, but it would give us shelter for the night while we figure out a longer-term plan." "Us?" Daisy questioned, uncertainty in her voice. "I gave my word," Owen said simply. "I'm not leaving you to face those men alone." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dusty street, Owen led his horse behind the church. He helped Daisy mount, passing Emma up to her before swinging into the saddle behind them. The baby, exhausted from the day's stress, had fallen into a fitful sleep against her mother's chest. "Hold onto her tight," Owen instructed as he guided the horse away from town, taking a roundabout route to avoid being spotted. "It's not far, but the terrain gets rough." Daisy nodded, too tired to speak. The warmth of Owen's chest against her back and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them lulled her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. For the first time since Thomas's death 3 months earlier, she allowed herself to lean on someone else's strength, if only for a moment. The abandoned cabin appeared, as Owen had described, small and weathered, but with solid walls and a roof that would keep out the elements. He helped Daisy dismount, then quickly set about making the space habitable. Years of riding the range had taught him to prepare for emergencies. His saddlebags contained enough basic supplies for a few days. "It's not much," he apologized as he lit a small fire in the stone hearth, "but it'll keep you warm tonight." Daisy sat on a rough wooden chair, gently rocking Emma. "It's more than we had an hour ago," she said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." "Owen," he corrected with a small smile. "Mr. Hayes was my father, and he was a far better man than I'll ever be." Daisy studied him in the flickering firelight. He wasn't a traditionally handsome man, but there was something compelling about his face, perhaps the quiet strength in his blue eyes or the gentle way he moved despite his imposing size. "I doubt that very much," she said finally. As the night deepened around them, Owen prepared a simple meal from his provisions while Daisy tended to Emma. The baby's cries had subsided once she was fed and changed, and now she slept peacefully in a makeshift bed Owen had created from his spare shirt and saddle blanket. "She's a beautiful child," Owen observed, watching the baby's peaceful breathing. Daisy's expression softened with maternal pride. "She looks like her father, same eyes." She traced a finger along Emma's cheek. "Thomas never even got to see her. He died 2 weeks before she was born." "I'm sorry," Owen said quietly. "How did it happen, if you don't mind my asking?" Daisy stared into the fire, memories casting shadows across her face. "Mining accident. There was a cave-in at the claim he was working. Thomas always believed there was a rich vein just waiting to be found." She sighed. "He was right in the end. His last dig uncovered enough gold to secure our future, but his brothers believe it should stay in the Fletcher family." "And legally?" Owen asked. "Thomas left everything to me and our child in his will," Daisy said firmly. "But Jacob and the others claim I forged the document, without Thomas here to confirm it." She shrugged helplessly. Owen nodded thoughtfully. "First light, I'll ride back to town, see what I can learn about these Fletcher brothers, maybe find someone willing to stand against them." Daisy shook her head. "You've done enough already. This isn't your fight." "Maybe not," Owen acknowledged, "but I've never been good at walking away from trouble." He smiled slightly. "Gets me into no end of difficulties, according to my mother. Where is your family?" Daisy asked, realizing she knew almost nothing about the man who had risked himself for her. "Gone," Owen replied simply. "Farm in Kansas. Drought took the crops 3 years running, then fever took my parents and younger sister last winter." His voice was matter of fact, but Daisy recognized the pain he kept carefully contained. "I've been drifting since, taking work where I can find it." "I'm sorry," Daisy said softly, understanding his loss all too well. Owen nodded his acknowledgement, then stood and stretched. "You should get some rest. Take the bedroll, I'll keep watch tonight." Daisy wanted to protest but found she lacked the energy. 3 days of constant vigilance had left her drained. "Wake me in a few hours," she said. "You need sleep too." Owen agreed, though they both knew he had no intention of waking her. As Daisy settled onto the bedroll near Emma, she watched through half-closed eyes as Owen positioned himself by the window, silhouetted against the night sky. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the quiet strength of his profile as he kept guard over them. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the soft rustling of wind through pine needles. Daisy woke with a start, momentarily disoriented before remembering the events of the previous day. Emma was still sleeping soundly beside her, tiny fists curled against her cheeks. Across the cabin, Owen dozed in a sitting position, his back against the wall and his hat pulled low over his eyes. Daisy moved quietly, not wanting to wake either of her companions as she rekindled the fire and heated water for coffee. The domestic task felt strange after days of running, but there was comfort in the routine. The aroma of brewing coffee roused Owen, who straightened with a sheepish expression. "Meant to stay awake," he mumbled, rubbing his neck. "Even heroes need sleep," Daisy replied with a small smile, offering him a tin cup of the steaming liquid. Owen accepted it gratefully, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Daisy, one she quickly dismissed as simple gratitude for his kindness. "What's your plan?" she asked as Owen savored the coffee. "Head back to town, see what I can learn," he repeated his idea from the night before. "These brothers, they must have enemies, people who might be willing to help you," Daisy nodded slowly. "Thomas had a friend, Benjamin Walsh. They grew up together. Ben never liked Jacob or the others." She hesitated, "but involving him puts him at risk too." "Let's give him the choice," Owen suggested. "Sometimes a man wants the opportunity to do what's right." After a simple breakfast, Owen prepared to leave. "Bar the door behind me," he instructed Daisy. "Don't open it for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more." Daisy nodded, memorizing the signal. "Be careful," she said, surprised by how much she meant it despite barely knowing this man. Owen touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, then mounted his horse and rode toward town, disappearing among the trees. Daisy watched until he was out of sight, then secured the cabin door as instructed, settling in for a long wait. The town of Redemption Creek was already bustling when Owen arrived. He tied his horse at the livery stable, paying extra for a good rubdown and fresh hay. The stable boy, a freckled youth of about 15, eyed him curiously. "New in town, mister," Owen nodded, seeing an opportunity for information. "Just passing through, looking for work maybe." He flipped the boy a coin. "Name's Owen Hayes, what's yours?" "Jimmy Wilson," the boy replied, pocketing the coin with a quick grin. "What kind of work you looking for?" "Ranch hand, mostly," Owen said casually. "Though I hear there might be mining opportunities around these parts." Jimmy's expression changed subtly. "You'd be thinking of the Fletcher claim, I reckon, though there's been some trouble there since old Thomas died." Owen feigned ignorance. "That right. What kind of trouble?" "Family dispute," Jimmy said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Thomas's widow inherited everything, but his brothers claim she ain't entitled. Been ugly business." He glanced around, then added, "They're looking for her now, offering $20 to anyone who spots her." Owen whistled low, as if impressed by the sum. "Must be quite a claim." "Rich enough to kill for, some say," Jimmy replied with the dramatic flair of youth. "Though I wouldn't repeat that where Jacob Fletcher might hear it." "Appreciate the warning," Owen said. "This Thomas Fletcher, he have any friends in town who might know more about the situation?" "Always good to understand local politics before getting involved," Jimmy thought for a moment. "Ben Walsh was his closest friend, runs the assay office down by the bank." He hesitated. "But I wouldn't go asking too many questions if I were you." "The Fletchers don't take kindly to outsiders poking into their business." Owen thanked the boy for the information and headed toward the assay office, moving with the casual confidence of a man with nothing to hide. The main street was crowded with the usual mix of frontier life shopkeepers opening their establishments. Women carrying baskets of goods, miners and cowboys moving between the saloon and the general store. The assay office was a small but well-maintained building with a sign proclaiming B. Walsh, licensed assayer, hanging above the door. Owen entered to find a bespectacled man in his late 30s carefully weighing dust on a precise scale. He looked up at Owen's entrance, offering a professional smile. "Good morning, how can I help you?" Owen removed his hat, approaching the counter. "Morning. I understand you're the man to see about mining prospects in the area." Benjamin Walsh nodded, setting aside his work. "I am indeed. Looking to stake a claim?" "Possibly," Owen said, studying the man's face for any sign of dishonesty. "I heard there might be one available. Belonged to a man named Fletcher." The assayer's expression closed immediately, his eyes darting to the window as if checking whether anyone had overheard. "That claim isn't for sale," he said stiffly. "And I'd advise you to forget you ever heard of it if you value your health." Owen nodded slowly, then took a calculated risk. "What if I told you I've seen Daisy Fletcher?" Walsh's face paled, and he quickly came around the counter to lock the door and flip the sign to closed. When he turned back to Owen, his expression was a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Where is she? Is Emma with her? Are they safe?" "They're safe for now," Owen confirmed, relieved to have found an ally. "But they need help. The Fletcher brothers are hunting them." Walsh ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I've been worried sick. Daisy came to me when Thomas died, asking me to verify the claim's value for the inheritance papers. When Jacob found out, he shook his head grimly. He threatened to burn down my office with me inside it if I helped her." "But you did anyway," Owen surmised. "Thomas was like a brother to me," Walsh said simply. "The real kind, not like those vultures." He studied Owen intently. "Who are you and why are you helping her?" Owen explained how he'd found Daisy behind the church, omitting the exact location where he'd hidden her and Emma. Walsh listened carefully, his initial suspicion gradually giving way to cautious optimism. "If what you say is true, you're either very brave or very foolish," he said when Owen finished. "Jacob Fletcher doesn't forget a slight, and he considers Daisy's claim the biggest slight of all." "I've met men like him before," Owen said evenly. "They only have power when people are too afraid to stand against them," Walsh smiled grimly. "True enough. But in this case, he also has the law on his side, or at least Sheriff Barlow, which amounts to the same thing in Redemption Creek. Then we need a different approach, Owen said. Daisy mentioned a will. Is there a copy somewhere safe? Walsh nodded. I have one locked in my safe. Thomas was thorough, had it properly witnessed and notarized in Helena before he returned to the claim, but Jacob claims it's a forgery and without Thomas to confirm. Would a judge in Helena see things differently than Sheriff Barlow? Owen asked. Possibly, Walsh conceded. But getting Daisy safely to Helena is the challenge. Jacob has men watching the roads and the stage office. Owen considered this information. What if we created a distraction? Something big enough to occupy the Fletcher brothers while Daisy and Emma slip out of the area? Walsh leaned forward, intrigued. What did you have in mind? As they discussed possibilities, neither man noticed the shadow that passed by the window, pausing briefly before moving on toward the hotel where the Fletcher brothers were staying. Back at the cabin, Daisy had settled into an uneasy rhythm of caring for Emma and watching the forest for any sign of danger. The baby seemed to sense her mother's anxiety, fussing more than usual despite Daisy's attempts to soothe her. Hush now, sweet girl, Daisy murmured, rocking Emma gently. Everything will be all right. Mr. Hayes will help us. Even as she spoke the words, Daisy wondered at her own certainty. She barely knew Owen Hayes, yet something about his quiet confidence had penetrated the wall of fear she'd built around herself since Thomas's death. Perhaps it was desperation that made her trust him, or perhaps it was something in his eyes when he'd promised to stand by her until she was ready. A sound outside the cabin made Daisy freeze. She strained to listen, heart pounding as footsteps approached the door. Then came the knock, 3 raps, a pause, then 2 more. Relief flooded through her as she hurried to unbar the door. Owen stepped inside, his expression grave as he removed his hat. We may have a problem, he said without preamble. I spoke with Benjamin Walsh. He's willing to help, but someone might have seen me entering his office. Daisy's momentary relief evaporated. Did you tell him where we are? No, Owen assured her, but we should prepare to move quickly if necessary. Walsh has a copy of the will in his safe, and he believes a judge in Helena would uphold it despite Jacob's claims of forgery. Then we need to get to Helena, Daisy said, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time. Owen nodded. Walsh is arranging transport. There's a freight wagon leaving for Helena tomorrow at dawn. The driver is a friend of his who can be trusted. He hesitated. But we need to create a diversion to get past Jacob's men. Before he could elaborate, a distant sound caught his attention. Owen moved swiftly to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. His expression hardened as he turned back to Daisy. Riders coming, at least 3 of them. He grabbed his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. Take Emma and go out the back. There's a hollow beneath a fallen pine about 50 yards into the trees. Hide there and don't come out unless I call for you. Daisy clutched Emma to her chest, fear threatening to paralyze her. What about you? I'll lead them away, Owen said firmly. Go now, Daisy, please. The urgency in his voice spurred her to action. Daisy wrapped Emma more securely and slipped out the back of the cabin, keeping low as she made her way into the dense forest. Behind her, she heard Owen moving furniture, preparing for a confrontation she prayed wouldn't come. The hollow beneath the fallen pine was just as Owen had described, a natural shelter formed where the massive tree had been uprooted during some long-ago storm. Daisy crawled inside, curling her body protectively around Emma, who miraculously remained asleep despite the jostling. From her hiding place, Daisy could just make out the cabin through the trees. She watched in terror as 3 horsemen approached, recognizing Jacob's broad shoulders and the distinctive red bandana worn by his youngest brother, Samuel. Owen appeared in the doorway of the cabin, rifle held casually but ready. Afternoon, gentlemen, she heard him call out. Something I can help you with. Jacob's response was too low for Daisy to hear, but his aggressive posture spoke volumes. Owen remained calm, one hand raised in a placating gesture while the other kept a firm grip on his rifle. The conversation continued for several tense minutes, with Jacob becoming increasingly agitated while Owen maintained his composed stance. Suddenly, Jacob dismounted, followed by his brothers. The three men spread out, clearly intending to surround the cabin. Owen stepped back inside, closing the door. For a moment, everything was still. Then Jacob shouted something, and gunfire erupted, the sharp crack of revolvers echoing through the forest. Daisy pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Emma woke with a start, her tiny face scrunching in confusion at the loud noises. Daisy rocked her desperately, praying the baby wouldn't cry out and reveal their hiding place. More shots rang out, this time from inside the cabin, Owen returning fire. One of the Fletcher brothers cried out in pain. Through gaps in the trees, Daisy saw Samuel stumble backward, clutching his shoulder. Jacob roared in anger, firing repeatedly at the cabin's windows. The exchange continued for what seemed like an eternity but was probably only minutes. Then, to Daisy's horror, smoke began to rise from the back of the cabin. The Fletchers had set fire to the structure. "Come out, Cowboy," Jacob's voice carried clearly through the trees, "or burn with the cabin." There was no response from inside. The smoke thickened, flames becoming visible as they licked up the wooden walls. Daisy bit her lip until she tasted blood, torn between her instinct to remain hidden and her desperate need to know if Owen was still alive. Just as the fire began to engulf the roof, a figure burst through the back door of the cabin. Owen, his clothing singed and face blackened with soot, fired 2 rapid shots at the Fletchers before disappearing into the trees on the opposite side of the clearing from where Daisy hid. The distraction worked. Jacob and his remaining uninjured brother took off in pursuit, leaving Samuel to tend his wounded shoulder by the horses. Daisy remained frozen in her hiding place, uncertain what to do. If she ran, Samuel might spot her. If she stayed, the fire might spread to the surrounding forest. Her decision was made for her when Emma, overwhelmed by the smoke drifting through the trees, began to cough. The sound, though small, carried in the momentary quiet. Samuel's head snapped up, his gaze sweeping the forest edge where Daisy hid. "Who's there?" he called, drawing his revolver despite his injured shoulder. "Show yourself." Daisy curled more tightly around Emma, trying to quiet the baby's coughs. Samuel began to walk toward the trees, his weapon raised. "I know you're there," he called. "Come out now, and maybe Jacob will be merciful when he returns." He was less than 20 yards from her hiding place when a shot rang out from somewhere to Daisy's right. Samuel cried out, dropping his gun as a bullet struck his hand. A second shot kicked up dirt at his feet. "Back away from them, Fletcher," Owen's voice called from the trees. "Next one goes through your heart." Samuel stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding hand. "You're dead, Cowboy," he shouted, though his voice shook with pain and fear. "Jacob will hunt you to the ends of the earth for this. He's welcome to try," Owen replied, emerging from the trees with his rifle trained steadily on Samuel. "Now mount up and ride out of here. Tell your brother if he comes after Daisy or the child again, I won't aim for the shoulder or the hand." Samuel hesitated, clearly weighing his options. In the distance, the sound of more gunshots suggested Jacob and the third brother were still searching the forest in the wrong direction. With a final curse, Samuel awkwardly mounted his horse one-handed and galloped away, heading back toward town rather than toward his brothers. Owen waited until Samuel was out of sight before hurrying to Daisy's hiding place. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, helping her out from under the fallen tree. Daisy nodded, though she was trembling violently. "Emma breathed in some smoke," she said anxiously. Owen examined the baby, who had settled back into hiccuping cries now that the immediate danger had passed. "She'll be fine, but we need to get farther from the fire." He looked back at the cabin, now fully engulfed in flames. "And we need to move quickly before Jacob and his brother realize Samuel's gone. Where will we go?" Daisy asked, clutching Emma close as Owen led them deeper into the forest, away from the burning cabin and the sounds of pursuit. "There's an old line shack about 3 miles north of here," Owen replied, keeping his voice low as they moved through the underbrush. "Walsh told me about it. It's on property owned by a rancher who despises the Fletchers. We'll be safe there until morning." As they made their way through the forest, Owen kept a vigilant watch for signs of pursuit. Daisy followed closely, her mind racing with the realization of how quickly their sanctuary had been discovered. "How did they find us?" she asked when they paused briefly for Owen to check their bearings. Owen's expression was grim. "Someone in town must have followed me when I left Walsh's office. I was careful, but—" He shook his head in frustration. "I'm sorry, Daisy. You have nothing to apologize for," she said firmly. "You've risked everything for us. I'm the one who should be sorry for involving you in this mess." Owen's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Some things are worth the risk," he said simply, before turning to continue their journey. The line shack proved to be little more than a one-room shelter used by cowboys during roundup season, but it was solid and well hidden among a stand of pines. Owen checked the interior thoroughly before allowing Daisy and Emma inside. "It's not much," he apologized, clearing dust from a rough wooden table. "It's perfect," Daisy replied sincerely. After the terror of the past few hours, any safe haven seemed luxurious. As night fell, Owen built a small fire in the stone hearth, careful to keep the flames low to minimize smoke that might give away their position. The familiar domestic task reminded Daisy painfully of the previous evening in the now destroyed cabin. How quickly circumstances could change. "Walsh should meet us here at first light," Owen explained as they shared the meager provisions he'd managed to grab before fleeing the burning cabin. "His friend with the freight wagon will be waiting on the North Road. If all goes well, you'll be in Helena by tomorrow night." Daisy nodded, trying to focus on the hope of safety rather than the dangers that still lay between them and Helena. "And you?" she asked, suddenly realizing she hadn't considered what would happen to Owen once she reached the city. "Will you come with us?" Owen hesitated. "I'll see you safely to Helena," he said finally. "After that." He shrugged, the gesture eloquently expressing the uncertainty of his drifter's life, something twisted in Daisy's chest at the thought of Owen riding away once the danger had passed. In the short time she'd known him, he had become a fixed point in her world, someone solid and dependable amid the chaos that had engulfed her since Thomas's death. The realization that she might be developing feelings for this quiet, honorable man both thrilled and terrified her. "You could stay," she said before she could reconsider. "In Helena, I mean, there must be work for a man with your skills." Owen looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Maybe," he said softly. "Let's get you and Emma there safely first, then we can discuss the future." As the night deepened around them, Daisy settled Emma in a makeshift bed before taking her place near the fire. Owen insisted on keeping watch, positioning himself by the window where he could observe the approach to the shack. "You should rest," Daisy urged, seeing the exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. "You haven't slept properly in days." "I'll rest when you're safe," Owen replied, his tone brooking no argument. Daisy studied his profile in the firelight, noting the stubborn set of his jaw and the alertness in his eyes despite his fatigue. "You're a good man, Owen Hayes," she said softly. "Thomas would have liked you." Owen glanced at her, something vulnerable flashing briefly in his eyes before his usual calm returned. "He must have been a good man himself to have earned your love." "He was," Daisy confirmed, memories of her late husband bringing the familiar ache of loss. "Kind and honest. He believed in working hard and treating people fairly." She smiled sadly. "He would have been a wonderful father to Emma." "I've no doubt of that," Owen said quietly. They fell into companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire burned low. Eventually, despite her determination to stay awake, Daisy's exhaustion overtook her. She drifted into an uneasy sleep, her last conscious thought being gratitude for the steady presence of the man keeping watch over her and Emma. She woke with a start sometime later, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar surroundings. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a faint red glow over the shack's interior. Owen was no longer by the window. Panic flared in Daisy's chest until she spotted him kneeling beside Emma's makeshift bed, gently adjusting the blanket that had slipped from the sleeping baby's shoulders. The tenderness of the gesture made Daisy's heart constrict. She watched silently as Owen touched a gentle finger to Emma's cheek before returning to his post by the window. In that moment, something shifted irreversibly in Daisy's perception of him. This wasn't just a good man doing his duty, this was a man who cared, deeply and genuinely, for both her and her child. Dawn broke with a pale, misty light filtering through the trees. Owen, who had maintained his vigil through the night, stiffened as the sound of approaching hoofbeats reached them. He motioned for Daisy to stay back as he positioned himself by the door, rifle ready. 3 horses, he whispered, listening intently. Coming slowly, not in a hurry. Daisy gathered Emma in her arms, ready to run if necessary. The baby, sensing her mother's tension, remained unusually quiet, her wide eyes fixed on Daisy's face. The riders stopped a short distance from the shack. "Hello, the shack," a familiar voice called. "Owen, Daisy, it's Benjamin Walsh." Relief flooded through Owen's expression as he moved to the window to confirm the visitor's identity. "It's Walsh," he confirmed to Daisy, with 2 others. He opened the door cautiously, rifle still at the ready until he was certain of the newcomer's friendly intentions. Benjamin Walsh dismounted quickly, his face drawn with concern. "Thank God you're safe," he said, grasping Owen's hand firmly. "When I heard about the fire at the cabin, I feared the worst." "It was close," Owen admitted, ushering the visitors inside. "The Fletchers?" "Jacob and Nathaniel returned to town late last night, dragging Samuel with them," Walsh reported. "They're at the doctor's office now. Samuel's injuries aren't life-threatening, but they've put Jacob in a rage. He's offering $50 now for information on your whereabouts." Daisy paled at this news, but Walsh continued with a grim smile. "Fortunately, not everyone in Redemption Creek can be bought. These gentlemen," he gestured to his companions, "have agreed to help get you safely to Helena." The 2 men introduced themselves as Frank Donovan, the freight wagon driver, and Matthew Jenkins, a rancher whose property included the line shack where they had taken refuge. "The Fletchers have been trying to force me off my land for years," Jenkins explained, his weathered face hardening. "Any enemy of theirs is a friend of mine." "The wagon's ready," Donovan added. "We've hidden a compartment beneath the cargo floor. It'll be cramped, but it should get you past any watchers on the road to Helena." Owen nodded his approval of the plan. "How soon can we leave?" "Now would be best," Donovan advised. "The Fletchers will be watching the main roads out of town, but I know a back trail through Jenkins's property that connects to the Helena Road about 10 miles north. With luck, we'll be well on our way before they realize you're gone." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity as they prepared for the journey. Jenkins provided fresh provisions, while Walsh handed Owen a sealed envelope. "Thomas's will," he explained, "along with my sworn statement about its authenticity and the value of the claim. Judge Patterson in Helena is an honest man. He'll see justice done." Daisy thanked him, tears threatening as she realized how many people were risking themselves to help her and Emma. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Live well and raise that little girl right," Jenkins said simply. "That's repayment enough." The freight wagon was waiting in a clearing a short distance from the shack. True to Donovan's description, a compartment had been constructed beneath the cargo floor, hidden by crates of supplies bound for Helena. It was indeed cramped, barely large enough for Daisy, Emma, and Owen to lie side by side. "It's not ideal," Donovan acknowledged, "but it's only for a few hours just until we're safely past the areas where the Fletchers might have men watching." Daisy climbed in first, cradling Emma against her chest. Owen followed, his broad shoulders making the tight space even more confined. As Donovan and Walsh secured the hidden panel above them, plunging the compartment into near darkness save for thin slits that allowed air to circulate, Daisy found herself pressed against Owen's side, his warmth a reassuring presence in the enclosed space. "Try to rest if you can," Owen whispered as the wagon began to move, the gentle rocking motion surprisingly soothing despite their confinement. "It's a long journey to Helena." Daisy nodded, though she doubted sleep would come easily given their circumstances. Emma, however, seemed content, lulled by the motion and the warmth of being nestled between 2 adults. The hours passed slowly. Occasionally, Donovan would tap a signal on the floorboards above them, 2 quick raps, to indicate they should remain absolutely silent as the wagon passed other travelers or checkpoints. During these tense moments, Owen would place a protective arm around both Daisy and Emma, as if his embrace could shield them from discovery. The intimate proximity forced by their hiding place created a strange bubble of shared experience, intensifying the connection that had been growing between them since their first meeting behind the church. In hushed whispers during the quieter stretches of road, they shared stories of their lives, Daisy speaking of her childhood in Missouri, before coming west with her family as a young woman. Owen recounting tales of his years working cattle drives across the territories. "I was engaged once," Owen admitted during one such exchange, his voice so low Daisy had to lean closer to hear him. "Back in Kansas before the drought, Sarah was her name, daughter of a neighboring farmer." "What happened?" Daisy asked gently, sensing there was more to the story. Owen was silent for a moment before responding. "The drought happened. Her father decided to move the family to California, asked me to come along, but my parents were too sick to travel by then." His voice held no bitterness, only a quiet resignation. "We exchanged letters for a while, but eventually they stopped coming. Heard later she'd married a shopkeeper in Sacramento." "I'm sorry," Daisy said, understanding all too well the pain of lost dreams. "Don't be," Owen replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice even in the darkness. "If things had gone differently, I wouldn't be here now." The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that made Daisy's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, however, Donovan's urgent signal rapped above them, 2 quick taps followed by 3 more. Trouble ahead. The wagon slowed, then came to a stop. Muffled voices carried from outside, men asking questions, Donovan responding with casual ease. Owen tensed beside Daisy, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Freight for Helena," they heard Donovan explaining. "Dry goods mostly, some mining equipment." "Mind if we take a look?" an unfamiliar voice asked, though the tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. "Help yourself," Donovan replied affably, "though I'm on a schedule, so I'd appreciate if you didn't take all day about it." Footsteps sounded on the wagon bed above them as someone climbed up to inspect the cargo. Dust filtered through the air slits as crates were moved and canvas coverings disturbed. Daisy held her breath, clutching Emma tighter as the baby stirred restlessly. A worrying creak came from directly above their hiding place as weight settled on the false floor. For a heart-stopping moment, Daisy was certain they would be discovered. Then Jenkins's voice called out from somewhere nearby, "You fellows looking for something specific? Or just delaying honest working men for the fun of it?" The weight above them shifted as the searcher's attention was diverted. "Just doing our job, Jenkins," Fletcher's orders, "looking for that woman and baby that disappeared from town." "Well, they're certainly not in my freight," Donovan interjected with convincing irritation. "And I've got deliveries to make before nightfall, so if you're satisfied." There was a tense silence, then the sound of someone jumping down from the wagon. "Go on then," the unfamiliar voice said grudgingly, "but keep an eye out on the road. There's good money for anyone who spots them." "I'll bear that in mind," Donovan replied, and Daisy could imagine the neutral expression he would be maintaining to hide his true allegiance. The wagon lurched forward again, continuing its journey. Only when Donovan's all-clear signal, 3 evenly spaced taps, came several minutes later did Daisy allow herself to breathe normally again. "That was close," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Owen's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. "But we made it through," he reminded her, "and we're getting closer to Helena with every mile." The remainder of the journey passed without further incident. By late afternoon, Donovan signaled that it was safe to emerge from their hiding place. When the panel above them was removed, Daisy blinked in the sudden brightness, gratefully accepting Owen's hand as he helped her and Emma climb out. They had stopped in a small grove of trees just outside Helena. The city itself was visible in the near distance, a sprawling collection of buildings much larger than Redemption Creek, with the imposing structure of the territorial courthouse rising prominently among them. "This is where I leave you," Donovan said, shaking Owen's hand firmly. "Jenkins asked me to tell you there's a room waiting at the Miners' Rest Hotel. It's registered under his name to avoid alerting anyone who might be watching for Daisy Fletcher." "Thank you," Owen said sincerely, "for everything." Donovan nodded, then turned to Daisy. "Good luck with the judge, madam. If anyone can put those Fletcher brothers in their place, it's Judge Patterson." As Donovan's wagon rumbled away toward the city, Owen turned to Daisy with an encouraging smile. "Ready for the final leg of our journey." Daisy looked toward Helena, hope and apprehension mingling in her chest. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, adjusting Emma in her arms. The baby was awake and alert, seeming to sense that they had reached an important milestone. They walked the remaining distance to the city, Owen keeping a watchful eye for any sign of pursuit. The Miners' Rest proved to be a modest but clean establishment on a side street away from the main thoroughfare. The proprietor, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Holloway, showed them to a small suite of rooms without asking questions beyond confirming they were the guests Mr. Jenkins had telegraphed about. "Baths down the hall," she informed them briskly. "Dinner's served until 8, and there's a cradle in the bedroom for the little one." With that, she left them to settle in. The simple luxury of clean rooms after their ordeal was overwhelming. Daisy stood in the center of the sitting room, Emma still in her arms, suddenly overcome by the events of the past days. Her legs trembled and she might have fallen if Owen hadn't quickly moved to support her. "Easy," he murmured, guiding her to a chair. "You're safe now, both of you." Daisy nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Owen knelt before her, his face level with hers, his eyes filled with concern. "You should rest," he said gently. "I'll arrange for some food to be brought up, and tomorrow we'll go to the courthouse to see Judge Patterson." "Stay," Daisy said impulsively, catching his hand as he began to rise. "Please, I know it's not proper, but—" She hesitated, then continued with quiet determination. "I feel safe when you're near." Owen's expression softened. "I'll stay," he promised, "as long as you need me." The following morning dawned clear and bright, a good omen, Daisy thought as she dressed in the clean clothes Mrs. Holloway had provided. Emma, refreshed after a night in a proper cradle, gurgled happily as Daisy prepared her for their important meeting. Owen was waiting in the sitting room, his usually rumpled appearance transformed by a fresh shave and borrowed suit that fit him surprisingly well. He stood when Daisy entered, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look lovely," he said simply. Daisy flushed, pleased despite the gravity of their situation. "Thank you, and thank you for arranging all this." She gestured to the clothes and the comfortable rooms. "Mrs. Holloway deserves the credit," Owen replied modestly. "She seems to have connections throughout Helena." When I explained our situation in general terms, she took charge like a general organizing troops. The territorial courthouse was an imposing structure of red brick and white columns, designed to bring a sense of established authority to the frontier city. Owen and Daisy climbed the steps slowly, each acutely aware of the importance of the meeting ahead. Emma, dressed in a tiny white gown that Mrs. Holloway had somehow procured overnight, slept peacefully in Daisy's arms, oblivious to the proceedings that would determine her future. Judge Henry Patterson proved to be a stern-faced man in his 60s, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they fell upon. He received them in his chambers, listening attentively as Daisy explained her situation, supplemented by the documents Walsh had provided and Owen's account of the Fletcher brothers' pursuit. "I'm familiar with the Fletcher family," the judge said when they had finished, his expression grave. "Their reputation precedes them, and not favorably." He examined Thomas's will carefully, along with Walsh's sworn statement. "This appears to be in order, Mrs. Fletcher. Your late husband's intentions are quite clear." Relief surged through Daisy, but the judge wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "Jacob Fletcher has already filed a counterclaim in this court alleging the will is fraudulent, without your husband present to confirm his wishes." He spread his hands apologetically. "So they win?" Daisy asked, disbelief and anger coloring her voice. After everything they've done threatening me, endangering my child, burning down a cabin with people inside, they still get what they want. Judge Patterson held up a hand. I didn't say that, Mrs. Fletcher. The law may move slowly, but it does move. What you've described, the threats, the violence, those are criminal matters that go beyond the civil dispute over the claim. With all due respect, Judge, Owen interjected, the sheriff in Redemption Creek is unlikely to pursue charges against the Fletchers. He's been in their pocket for years, according to multiple sources. The judge nodded thoughtfully. That may be so, Mr. Hayes, but this is territorial court, not local. If what you've told me is true, I have the authority to issue warrants for the Fletcher brothers' arrest on charges of attempted murder, arson, and criminal intimidation. Hope flared again in Daisy's chest. You would do that. Justice isn't reserved only for those with power, Mrs. Fletcher, Judge Patterson said firmly. However, I must warn you, legal proceedings take time. The Fletchers will have the opportunity to defend themselves, and during that time, the claim will remain in dispute. What does that mean for Daisy and Emma? Owen asked, the protective note in his voice causing the judge to look at him with renewed interest. It means they should remain in Helena, where I can ensure their safety, Patterson replied, and it means they'll need resources to live on while the case proceeds. He considered for a moment, then added, there is a provision in territorial law that allows the court to release a portion of disputed assets for the maintenance of dependent family members. I believe I could justify releasing 20% of the claim's current proceeds to you, Mrs. Fletcher, to support yourself and your daughter during the proceedings. It wasn't the complete victory Daisy had hoped for, but it was far more than she had dared expect. Thank you, Your Honor, she said sincerely. Don't thank me yet, the judge cautioned. The Fletchers won't take this lying down. They'll fight, and they'll fight dirty. He fixed Owen with a penetrating gaze. Mrs. Fletcher and her daughter will need protection, Mr. Hayes. Are you planning to remain in Helena? The question hung in the air, laden with implications. Owen glanced at Daisy before responding, his expression unreadable. For as long as they need me, he said finally. The judge nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Good, I'll have my clerk prepare the necessary paperwork immediately. The warrants for the Fletchers should be dispatched by the end of the day. As they left the courthouse, the future still uncertain but significantly brighter than it had been hours earlier, Daisy turned to Owen. You don't have to stay, she said softly. You've already done more than anyone could ask. Owen stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the bright midday sun, his eyes were the clear blue of a summer sky, direct and honest as they met hers. What if I want to stay? He asked simply. Daisy's heart stuttered in her chest. Why would you? She whispered, though part of her already knew the answer or hoped she did. Because in all my years of drifting, I've never found anything worth stopping for, Owen said quietly. Not until I saw you behind that church, holding Emma like she was the most precious thing in the world. He hesitated, then continued with careful honesty. I know it hasn't been long, and I know you're still grieving Thomas. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just asking for a chance to see where this road leads. Emma chose that moment to wake, her tiny hand reaching up to grasp at the sunlight filtering through the trees above them. Daisy looked down at her daughter, then back at Owen, seeing the same gentle strength that had drawn her to him from the beginning. I think, she said slowly, that I'd like to find out where this road leads to. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes for the first time in months. Together. Owen's answering smile was like the breaking of dawn after the longest night. He offered his arm, and as Daisy took it, Emma nestled between them. She felt something she had thought lost forever. Hope, bright and undeniable as the Montana sky above them. The following weeks established a new rhythm for Daisy and Owen, as they settled into life in Helena while awaiting the legal proceedings against the Fletcher brothers. With the portion of the claim proceeds released by Judge Patterson, Daisy was able to rent a small but comfortable house on the outskirts of the city. Owen took a room at a nearby boarding house, maintaining propriety while remaining close enough to provide protection if needed. News from Redemption Creek arrived sporadically through telegrams from Benjamin Walsh. The Fletcher brothers had been arrested upon the arrival of the territorial marshals, though Jacob had managed to post bail almost immediately. Samuel and Nathaniel remained in custody, unable to match their elder brother's resources. Jacob, predictably, had begun a campaign of intimidation against Walsh and anyone else he suspected of helping Daisy, but the public nature of the charges had turned much of the town against him. "It seems your stand against them has inspired others to do the same," Owen observed one evening as he read Walsh's latest update to Daisy. They were sitting on the small porch of her rented house, watching the sunset while Emma slept peacefully in her cradle just inside the open door. "Not my stand," Daisy corrected gently. "Ours." She reached across the space between their chairs to touch his hand briefly. "None of this would have been possible without you, Owen," he smiled, the expression still somewhat shy despite the growing ease between them. "I only did what anyone would have done." "No," Daisy said firmly. "You did what few would have dared. You stood against men like the Fletchers when most would have walked away." She hesitated, then added softly, "You promised to stand there until I was ready, and you kept that promise even when it meant risking your life." Owen's fingers curled around hers, the simple contact sending warmth through her that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the summer evening. "Best decision I ever made," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Their courtship, if it could be called that, progressed with a deliberate slowness that respected Daisy's still fresh grief and the unconventional circumstances of their meeting. Owen came for dinner most evenings, often bringing small gifts for Emma, a carved wooden toy, a colorful ribbon, once a tiny silver locket that must have cost him a week's wages from the carpentry work he'd found in Helena. Daisy found herself looking forward to these visits with an anticipation that both excited and frightened her. Thomas had been gone less than a year, and part of her felt disloyal for the growing feelings she harbored for Owen. Yet another part recognized that life on the frontier was too precarious, too fleeting to deny the chance for happiness when it presented itself. Emma, for her part, had formed an immediate attachment to Owen. Her face would light up when he entered the room, tiny arms reaching for him with complete trust. Owen handled her with a natural ease that sometimes made Daisy's throat tight with emotion, especially when she caught him speaking softly to the baby when he thought no one was listening, telling her stories of brave cowgirls and kind-hearted outlaws, promising to teach her to ride a horse someday. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in golds and reds, the date for the Fletcher's trial was finally set. Judge Patterson called Daisy and Owen to his chambers to discuss the proceedings. "Jacob Fletcher has hired a high-priced lawyer from back east," he informed them, his expression grave. "They'll try to discredit you, Mrs. Fletcher. They'll question your character, your relationship with your late husband, anything they can use to cast doubt on the validity of his will." Daisy nodded, having expected as much. "I have nothing to hide, Your Honor." The judge glanced between her and Owen, his gaze shrewd. "They'll also likely question your relationship with Mr. Hayes here, suggest impropriety, perhaps even imply that there was something between you before your husband's death." Owen stiffened, his jaw tightening. "That's ridiculous. We never met until after Thomas Fletcher died. The truth matters less to men like the Fletchers than what they can make people believe," Patterson said wearily. "I'm not saying this to alarm you, but to prepare you. This won't be pleasant." As they left the courthouse, Owen was unusually quiet, his expression troubled. Daisy waited until they had walked several blocks before stopping in the shade of a large oak tree. "What's wrong?" she asked directly. "And don't say nothing. I know you better than that by now." Owen sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "The judge is right," he said finally. "The Fletchers will use our friendship against you in court, make it seem improper." "Let them try," Daisy said firmly. "We know the truth, but others might believe their lies," Owen persisted. "Your reputation, my reputation," Daisy interrupted, a hint of steel entering her voice. Owen Hayes, do you think I care what gossips might say when the future of my daughter is at stake? You should care, Owen insisted. This is a small community. Emma will grow up here. What people think is that you saved us, Daisy cut in again, stepping closer to him. That you risked everything for a woman and child you barely knew because it was the right thing to do. Her voice softened. And what I think is that I'm falling in love with you, Owen Hayes, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise because of what people might say. Owen stared at her, momentarily speechless. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Daisy, I've been in love with you since I saw you holding Emma behind that church, but I never thought, I didn't dare hope. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his weathered skin. Then stop hoping and start believing, she whispered, because it's true. Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration of feelings too long contained. When they parted, Daisy saw in Owen's eyes the same wonder she felt the marvel of finding something precious when least expected. I love you, he said simply, the words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Whatever comes with the trial with the Fletchers, we'll face it together. The trial of the Fletcher brothers began on a crisp October morning, drawing spectators from throughout the territory. The courthouse was packed, the atmosphere tense with anticipation as Judge Patterson called the proceedings to order. As predicted, Jacob Fletcher's Eastern lawyer, a slick-talking man named Harrington, launched immediately into a character assassination of Daisy, implying she had manipulated Thomas into changing his will and questioning her fitness as a mother. Daisy endured the questioning with dignity, her answers clear and unwavering despite the lawyer's attempts to rattle her. When Owen took the stand to testify about the Fletchers' pursuit and the burning of the cabin, Harrington turned his attention to their relationship. Mr. Hayes, he began with false cordiality, would you describe your feelings toward Mrs. Fletcher as protective? Owen met the lawyer's gaze steadily. Yes, I would. And would you say these protective feelings developed rather quickly after meeting her? I believed she was in danger, Owen replied evenly. My response would have been the same for anyone in her situation. Harrington smiled thinly. Indeed, yet you chose to remain in Helena after ensuring Mrs. Fletcher's safety. Why is that, Mr. Hayes? Before Owen could answer, Judge Patterson intervened. Mr. Harrington, I fail to see the relevance of these questions to the charges before this court. Your Honor, Harrington protested smoothly, the defense contends that Mrs. Fletcher and Mr. Hayes conspired to fabricate charges against my clients to distract from their own improper relationship and Mrs. Fletcher's fraudulent claim to the Fletcher mining property. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Daisy sat straighter, her face pale but composed as she met Owen's eyes across the room. He gave her a slight nod, drawing strength from her quiet courage. That's a serious allegation, Counselor, Judge Patterson said severely. Do you have evidence to support it? We have witnesses who will testify to seeing Mr. Hayes and Mrs. Fletcher in compromising situations, Harrington claimed. That's a lie, Owen said firmly, his voice carrying through the courtroom without being raised. Any relationship between Mrs. Fletcher and myself developed after the events in question and has always been conducted with propriety and respect. Judge Patterson studied Owen thoughtfully before turning back to Harrington. Produce these witnesses, Counselor. If you're making unfounded accusations to slander the character of the prosecution's witnesses, I will hold you in contempt. Harrington hesitated, glancing toward Jacob Fletcher, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. We're still securing their testimony, Your Honor. I thought as much, Patterson said dryly. The court will disregard these insinuations. Mr. Harrington, confine your questions to relevant matters or conclude your cross-examination. The remainder of the trial proceeded with similar attempts by the defense to distract from the substantive charges, but Judge Patterson maintained firm control of his courtroom. When Benjamin Walsh testified about the authenticity of Thomas's will and the subsequent threats made by Jacob Fletcher, even Harrington's aggressive cross-examination failed to shake his account. On the trial's fifth day, Daisy sat beside the territorial prosecutor as he delivered his closing arguments, emphasizing the pattern of intimidation and violence employed by the Fletcher brothers. From her position, she could see Owen in the gallery, his steady presence a comfort even across the crowded room. Emma was being cared for by Mrs. Holloway, who had become a staunch ally and friend during their months in Helena. When Judge Patterson finally delivered his verdict, the courthouse fell completely silent. With methodical precision, he found Jacob and Nathaniel Fletcher guilty of attempted murder, arson, and criminal intimidation. Samuel, due to his lesser involvement and cooperation with the authorities, received a reduced sentence. Furthermore, the judge continued, his voice ringing through the hushed courtroom, having reviewed the evidence regarding Thomas Fletcher's will, I find it to be valid and legally binding. The mining claim and all associated assets are hereby confirmed as the rightful property of Mrs. Daisy Fletcher and her daughter, Emma Fletcher. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers and angry shouts from the Fletcher's supporters. Through the commotion, Daisy's eyes found Owen's, sharing a moment of pure relief and joy that transcended the noise around them. Outside the courthouse, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the street, Owen made his way through the dispersing crowd to Daisy's side. Without hesitation or concern for the watching eyes, he swept her into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground. "It's over," he murmured as he set her down gently. "They can't hurt you or Emma anymore." Daisy laughed, the sound bright with relief and happiness. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to your courage," Owen corrected, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with tender familiarity. "And Judge Patterson's sense of justice," as they walked arm in arm toward Mrs. Holloway's to collect Emma. Daisy contemplated the future that now stretched before them, a future secure in the knowledge that her daughter's inheritance was protected, and more importantly, that she had found a partner worthy of sharing her life. "What happens now?" she asked, looking up at Owen as they paused at a street corner. He smiled, the expression transforming his normally serious face. "Now," he said softly, "if you'll have me, I'd like to court you properly, Daisy Fletcher, without hiding, without worrying what people might think. Court me." Daisy repeated, her lips curving in amusement. "Owen Hayes, I think we're well past the courting stage, don't you?" Owen laughed, the sound rich and free. "Perhaps," he conceded, "but some things are worth doing right." His expression grew more serious. "I want to be a father to Emma, Daisy. And a husband to you. Not because you need protection anymore, but because I love you both more than I ever thought possible." Daisy's heart seemed to expand in her chest, filled with a joy she had once believed lost forever. "I think," she said softly, "that Emma and I would like that very much." Winter arrived early that year, blanketing Helena in a pristine coat of white that transformed the frontier city into something magical. From the window of the small church on Pine Street, Daisy watched as late-arriving guests hurried through the snow, their breath forming clouds in the crisp December air. "Are you nervous?" asked Mrs. Holloway, who was helping adjust the simple veil that crowned Daisy's upswept hair. "No," Daisy replied truthfully, surprised by her own calm. "I've never been more certain of anything." Emma, now nearly a year old and recently taking her first tentative steps, sat contentedly on a blanket nearby, playing with the ribbons of her dress under the watchful eye of Benjamin Walsh's wife, Martha. The baby looked up at the sound of her mother's voice, offering a gummy smile that never failed to melt Daisy's heart. "She knows something special is happening today," Martha observed, smiling as Emma babbled happily. "The smartest child in the territory, Mrs." Holloway agreed proudly, having appointed herself Emma's honorary grandmother in the months since their arrival in Helena. A knock at the door announced Judge Patterson, who had agreed to walk Daisy down the aisle in the absence of any family. The judge, normally so formal in his black robes, looked almost boyish in his Sunday best, a sprig of pine tucked into his lapel to match the simple decorations that adorned the church. "It's time, Mrs. Fletcher," he said with a warm smile. "Or should I say almost Mrs. Hayes?" Daisy took a deep breath, smoothing the skirt of her ivory dress not white, out of respect for Thomas, but a warm, creamy shade that complemented her fair coloring. It was simple but elegant, made by Mrs. Holloway and Martha Walsh as a wedding gift. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady with conviction. As Martha picked up Emma and Mrs. Holloway hurried ahead to take her place in the church, Daisy accepted Judge Patterson's arm. The doors opened, and the small gathering of friends rose as Daisy began her walk toward the altar where Owen waited, his back straight and proud in his new suit. When he turned to watch her approach, the naked adoration in his eyes nearly brought Daisy to tears. This was a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and had offered not pity but partnership, who had never tried to replace Thomas in her heart but had instead created his own place there, solid and enduring. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the minister's words resonating through the small church as Daisy and Owen exchanged vows they had written themselves. When Owen promised to be a father to Emma, his voice broke slightly, revealing the depth of his love for the child who had captured his heart as surely as her mother had. As they exchanged rings, simple gold bands that represented not ownership, but an unbroken circle of commitment, Daisy thought of the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate hiding place behind a church to this altar, with friends surrounding them and a future bright with promise. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, beaming at the couple before him. "Mr. Hayes, you may kiss your bride." Owen's lips met Daisy's in a kiss that sealed their vows more eloquently than words ever could tender yet passionate, a promise of all the days to come. When they parted, both were smiling, their joy reflected in the faces of those who had gathered to witness their union. Martha brought Emma forward, and Owen lifted the child into his arms with practiced ease, completing the family circle. As they turned to face their friends, Daisy felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her soul. This was her family now not replacing what she had lost, but building something new and precious from the ashes of grief. The small reception at their new home, a modest but comfortable house built on land purchased with proceeds from the mining claim, lasted well into the evening. Friends shared stories and offered toasts to the newlyweds, the atmosphere warm with goodwill despite the winter chill outside. As the last guests departed, leaving Owen and Daisy alone with a sleeping Emma, they stood together by the hearth, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. "Happy?" Owen asked softly, his arm around Daisy's waist. She leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "More than I ever thought possible again," she admitted. "When Thomas died, I believed that part of my life was over forever. And now," Owen prompted, turning her gently to face him. "Now I know that life can surprise you," Daisy said, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "That sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest dawns." Owen smiled, drawing her closer. "I was just a drifter," he murmured, "until I found something worth stopping for. A woman hiding behind a church with a baby in her arms. And you said you'd stand there until I was ready," Daisy recalled, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "I think I've been ready since that moment, even if I didn't know it then." "Well, Mrs. Hayes," Owen said, the new name sending a thrill through Daisy, "I intend to keep standing by you and Emma for all the days to come. That's a promise." As they sealed this newest promise with a kiss, Daisy knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, the drifter who had found his home, the widow who had found new love, and the child who would grow up surrounded by the legacy of one good man and the devotion of another. And it had all begun behind a church, with a baby in her arms and a cowboy who promised to wait until she was ready. Spring came early to Helena the following year, bringing with it new beginnings and unexpected joys. The mining claim that had once been a source of such conflict was now proving even more valuable than Thomas had predicted, providing Daisy, Owen, and Emma with financial security that few in the territory enjoyed. But the true wealth in their lives had nothing to do with gold. As Daisy watched Owen teaching Emma to walk in the garden behind their home, the toddler's delighted giggles filling the air as she toddled on unsteady legs between her mother and the man she now called Papa. Daisy knew she had found a treasure beyond price. "She's getting faster," Owen observed proudly as Emma made her way to him for the dozenth time, tiny hands outstretched in complete trust that he would catch her if she fell. "Going to be running circles around us by summer. Heaven help us then," Daisy laughed, joining them on the grass. She leaned against Owen's shoulder as Emma plopped down between them, fascinated by a dandelion growing nearby. Owen's arm encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "I have news," he said, his tone casual though Daisy detected an undercurrent of excitement. "Benjamin Walsh telegraphed this morning. The new shaft at the claim has uncovered what might be the richest vein yet." "That's wonderful," Daisy said, genuinely pleased though not surprised. Thomas had always insisted the claim would eventually yield a fortune, and it seemed he had been right all along. "There's more," Owen continued. "Walsh also mentioned that Jacob Fletcher was released from territorial prison last week." Daisy tensed involuntarily, her hand moving protectively toward Emma. Although Jacob had received the harshest sentence of the brothers, 5 years, he had apparently been granted early release for good behavior. "Don't worry," Owen said quickly, noting her reaction. "He's left the territory entirely." According to Walsh, he was seen boarding an eastbound train the day after his release. "Seems he's decided Montana holds too many bad memories." Relief washed over Daisy. The specter of Jacob Fletcher had lingered at the edges of her happiness despite his imprisonment, a shadow that could never quite be banished while he remained in Montana. "Good riddance," she said fervently. Owen nodded, then hesitated before adding, "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, something important." Something in his tone made Daisy look up sharply. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," he assured her quickly. "Just the opposite, in fact." He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about Emma's future, about our family." Daisy waited, sensing he was building toward something significant. "I love Emma as if she were my own," Owen said, watching as the toddler examined her dandelion with serious concentration. "But legally, she's still Emma Fletcher. I was wondering, how would you feel about me formally adopting her, making her Emma Hayes in name as well as in heart?" Tears sprang to Daisy's eyes at the unexpected request. Though Owen had been a devoted father to Emma in every way that mattered since their marriage, they had never discussed legal adoption. The fact that he wanted to make that commitment official touched Daisy deeply. "I think that would be wonderful," she said softly. "Thomas would approve, I know. He would want Emma to have a father who loves her as much as you do." Owen's expression lightened with relief. "I wasn't sure how you'd feel. I didn't want you to think I was trying to erase Thomas from her life." "Never," Daisy assured him, taking his hand. "You've always honored his memory, both for me and for Emma. This isn't about replacing him, it's about giving Emma the security of knowing that, whatever happens, she has a father who chose her, who wants her as his daughter in every way." Emma, as if sensing she was the subject of discussion, abandoned her dandelion and crawled into Owen's lap, her small hands patting his cheeks as she babbled happily. Owen caught one of her hands and pressed a kiss to the tiny palm, his eyes suspiciously bright. "There's something else," Daisy said, suddenly nervous despite the perfect moment. "Something I've been waiting to tell you." Owen looked at her questioningly, his arms automatically cradling Emma as she settled against his chest. "Emma isn't going to be an only child for much longer," Daisy said, her hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Dr. Morgan confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Owen." For a moment, Owen seemed frozen, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, carefully setting Emma aside on the grass, he gathered Daisy into an embrace so tender it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." He pulled back to look at her, his face alight with joy. "When?" "Late autumn, the doctor thinks," Daisy replied, laughing at his wonderstruck expression. "Around Thanksgiving." "A baby," Owen repeated, shaking his head in amazement. He reached for Emma, including her in their embrace. "Did you hear that, little one? You're going to be a big sister." Emma, of course, understood nothing of the conversation, but she seemed to absorb their happiness, giggling as Owen lifted her high in the air before bringing her down for a kiss. As they sat together in the spring sunshine, making plans and dreaming of the future, Daisy marveled at how far they had come from that desperate day behind the church. Life had taken her on a journey she could never have imagined, through darkest grief to unexpected joy, from the terror of being hunted to the security of being cherished. And through it all, the constant had been Owen's steady, loyal, loving Owen, who had promised to stand with her until she was ready and had never wavered in that promise. Now, as they prepared to welcome a new life into their family, Daisy knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home, not in a place but in the heart of the man beside her. The years passed with the sweet rhythm of family life, each season bringing new joys and challenges. William Thomas Hayes arrived as predicted in late November, a robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined nature. Emma took to her role as big sister with enthusiasm, appointing herself William's special protector and companion. By the time William celebrated his 3rd birthday, the Hayes family had grown again with the arrival of twin girls, Sarah and Grace, who kept Daisy and Owen happily exhausted with their boundless energy and mischievous antics. Their home, once spacious for a family of 3, now rang with the laughter and occasional squabbles of 4 active children. Helena grew alongside the Hayes family, transforming from a frontier mining town into a thriving city as Montana moved toward statehood. The original mining claim that had caused so much strife continued to produce well, providing a legacy that would secure the children's futures. Under Owen's careful management, the proceeds were invested in land and businesses throughout the territory, creating stability that few frontier families enjoyed. On a crisp autumn day in 1889, as Montana prepared to enter the Union as the 41st state, 10-year-old Emma sat beside Daisy on the porch swing, watching as Owen taught William to throw a ball in the yard. The twins, not quite 2, napped inside under the watchful eye of Mrs. Holloway, who, despite claiming to be too old for childcare, doted on all the Hayes children as if they were her own grandchildren. "Mama," Emma said thoughtfully, leaning against Daisy's shoulder, "do you ever think about what would have happened if Papa hadn't found us that day behind the church?" Daisy looked down at her daughter, surprised by the question. Emma knew the story of how their family had begun. It had become something of a family legend, told and retold on special occasions, but she had never before asked about alternative paths. "Sometimes," Daisy admitted, smoothing Emma's dark blonde hair so like her own, "but not often." "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged, her young face serious beyond her years. "Miss Jenkins at school was talking about how some things happen for a reason. That sometimes bad things lead to good things." She looked up at Daisy, her expression earnest, like how losing my first father was sad, but it led us to Papa. Daisy's heart constricted at her daughter's simple wisdom. "That's true," she said softly. "Though I still wish you could have known your father, Thomas. He would have been so proud of the young lady you're becoming." "I wish I could have known him too," Emma said thoughtfully, "but I'm glad we found Papa, or that he found us." She smiled suddenly. "Do you think he knew, when he saw us behind the church, that we would become his family?" Daisy glanced toward Owen, who was now on his knees in the grass, patiently showing William how to hold the ball properly. His face, more weathered now than when they'd first met but still handsome to her eyes, was alight with the joy he took in teaching his son. "I don't think either of us knew what would happen," Daisy replied honestly, "but I think even then he saw something worth protecting, worth fighting for." She hugged Emma closer. "And I'm grateful every day that he was brave enough to stand there until we were ready." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. After a moment, she slipped from the swing. "I'm going to help Papa teach Will," she announced, heading toward her brother and stepfather with the confidence of a child who has never doubted her place in the world. Daisy watched as Owen welcomed Emma into the impromptu baseball lesson, his face softening with the special smile he reserved for his oldest daughter. Though Emma bore the Hayes name legally since Owen's adoption had been finalized years earlier, both Daisy and Owen had ensured she knew the story of Thomas Fletcher, his dreams, his courage, his love for the wife and unborn child he would never meet. It was important to them that Emma understood she was the product of two good men's love, each in their own way. As the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across their yard, Owen gathered the children and joined Daisy on the porch. William immediately climbed into his mother's lap, while Emma leaned against the porch railing, still full of energy despite the hour. "Time to check on those rascals," Owen said, referring to the twins. "They've been suspiciously quiet, Mrs. Holloway probably has them completely spoiled by now," Daisy predicted with a smile. "They'll be impossible to put to bed," Owen laughed, the sound still capable of warming Daisy from the inside out after all these years. "Worth it," he said simply. As William began to doze against her shoulder, Daisy reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment of domestic tranquility. From a desperate young widow hiding behind a church with a newborn baby to the matriarch of a thriving family, with a husband who loved her beyond measure and children who filled their days with purpose and joy. Later that evening, after the children were finally asleep and the house had settled into nighttime stillness, Daisy found Owen on the back porch, gazing up at the star-filled Montana sky. She joined him, slipping her hand into his with the easy familiarity of long marriage. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. Owen squeezed her hand gently. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," he replied. "How different my life would be if I hadn't stopped in Redemption Creek that day." "We're the lucky ones," Daisy corrected him. "You saved us, Owen." "In every way a person can be saved." He turned to her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "You saved me too, Daisy. I was just drifting with no purpose beyond the next job, the next town." He touched her face with his free hand, the gesture as tender as it had been in the early days of their courtship. "You and Emma gave me a reason to stop drifting, a reason to build something lasting. And look what we've built," Daisy murmured, leaning into his touch. "It's more than I ever dared dream of." Owen's kiss was gentle, a reaffirmation of the vows they had exchanged all those years ago. When they parted, he kept her close, both of them content to share the peaceful moment beneath the vast Montana sky. "I love you, Daisy Hayes," Owen said simply, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. "And I love you," Daisy replied, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for this man who had kept his promise to stand by her, who had helped her create a life filled with love and purpose from the ashes of despair. As they stood together, bound by years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges, Daisy thought once more of that desperate day behind the church. How terrified she had been, how certain that her future held nothing but struggle and fear. She could never have imagined then the rich tapestry of life that awaited her all because a kind-hearted cowboy had seen a woman in need and had chosen to stand with her until she was ready to face the world again. Some journeys began with a single step. Theirs had begun with a promise that had been kept through all the years and all the changes, a promise that would continue to guide them through whatever the future might hold. A promise to stand together, always.